Hello and a warm welcome. You've joined us on News Now right here on ET Now. I'm Ashesha Advaryu and let's begin with the biggest story of the day. Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau has now released the preliminary report on the Air India B787 flight crash in Ahmedabad on the 12th of June. What does the report state? What has surfaced to light from the cockpit voice recording? Before we move on and discuss this with our guests, we now have Samir Dikshit, my colleague, who's standing by with the key points from the report. Samir, over to you.
A month after Air India's aircraft crash in Ahmedabad on June 12th, now the investigating authority AAIB, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, has submitted its preliminary report to the Ministry of Civil Aviation, and it has now been made public as well. So this report has highlighted a couple of important points, and one of the points is that the aircraft experienced a temporary disruption of the fuel supply. At 13:38 hours, the flight or the aircraft, which was cruising at a speed of 180 knots IAS, at that point, the fuel cutoff switch, it moved from run to cutoff, and it was also mentioned in the report that one of the pilot asked, why did you cut off the fuel? The other pilot responded, I did not do so. So this also indicates to a possibility of a miscommunication. It has also been mentioned in the report that engine 1, it tried to recover, it tried to get stabilized after experiencing the initial failure, whereas the engine 2, it failed to get stabilized. So engine 2 was not able to recover, whereas engine 1 was trying to recover and trying to provide that necessary supply or the power to the aircraft, but engine 2, it completely failed to stabilize. And then in the report it has been mentioned that aircraft, it hit the building object, and then it led to the fatal incident. And in the report it has also been mentioned that all the necessary evidence are being collected, though the fuel sample from the accident site, they were hardly able to collect it, but the fuel sample from the oil tanker, it has been collected, and a couple of other evidences are also being collected and now being analyzed by the investigating authority. A detailed report is likely to be submitted within 90 days of this particular accident. It has also been mentioned in the initial report that as of now, no safety recommendations or directives it has been issued to Boeing 787 aircraft which met the accident, or even to GE, which is the engine manufacturer. So that's a preliminary report that has been out, and on this report, Boeing has given an official statement that they will defer to the AAIB report and the details that they will share based on ICAO Annexure 13.
So those are some of the key takeaways from the preliminary report, and the final report is likely to be released within 90 days from the date of the accident. Samir, thanks so much for joining us with all those details. But to discuss this, we are now joined by Mr. Mark D. Martin, CEO of Martin Consulting, and Devesh Agarwal, Aviation Analyst and founder, BangaloreAviation.com. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here on ET Now. But Mark, coming to you first then. Engine fuel control switches were cut off seconds after liftoff, and the report clearly states that dual engine cutoff switches moved on from run to cutoff within just 1 second. If you can tell us, how do you read this, and can the switches actually be cut off automatically, or can it be done only through human intervention?
Okay, so first up, I think we got to understand that these switches are mechanical and they are foolproof. They've got a gate, they've got a mechanism which locks it into position. There's no chance in hell that anyone, especially during flight, anyone's hand goes back and you can bring it down to cutoffs. That's never going to happen. Let's look at the evidence of what we know. After takeoff, the ram air turbine deploys. The ram air turbine only deploys when you have a complete total engine failure. That means you've lost electrical, hydraulic, pneumatic, flight controls, everything. That's your last emergency. That's your last straw. Your life depends on it. If the ram air turbine deploys, that means something has triggered all your systems off, including the engines, and your fuel cutoff switches have gone back to cutoff. Okay, the procedure on the 787, the restart procedure in the quick response handbook, which is the emergency book you check, is to switch it back on. Now, when you switch it back on, it takes 3 to 4 minutes for the engines to start, and it takes at least 7 to 10 minutes to spool up to give you thrust. Now, when you're 180 knots, you've got your takeoff thrust, you're 700 feet above ground. There's no chance that you have 6 minutes when you're dropping like a rock and losing speed. So I think very, very clearly we need to investigate that fuel cutoff switch. Now in 2018, there has been an SB which came out. It was an advisory SB. There have also been incidents, I must point out, with several airlines, including ANA, Nippon ANA, including Ethiopian, airlines in Europe, with the 787, that this incident has occurred where the fuel cutoff switches have gone, the fuel switch has gone back to cutoff. It's not the first time this is occurring. It's happened before, and Boeing themselves have issued a advisory circular. Let's be very, very clear. This investigation now intensifies. It goes to a whole new level. It's just the beginning. It's the tip of the iceberg, and now AAIB, along with the NTSB and or several other agencies, will have to investigate the real cause of this. For the moment, it is very unlikely that the pilots would be foolish and stupid enough to put the hand back and turn it back off to idle. Now, remember, when the rat deploys, there's a lot of vibration in the aircraft. As a pilot, I can tell you, any pilot will tell you, rat deploying creates a tremendous amount of vibration. We don't know. We're speculating at this stage whether that vibration led to the switches going back to cutoff. Maybe the switch mechanism had a problem. Maybe it was faulty. We're not sure. But all I'm going to say is that something doesn't add up. And the most important thing I want to ask you today is that in the DGCA, in the AAIB initial preliminary report, they've talked about the advanced flight data recorder data. But let me tell you that the 787 also has a cockpit camera. The cockpit camera records all actions and data, and that footage of the cockpit camera goes into the flight data recorder, the enhanced airborne flight recorder. Now, why isn't the investigation report talking about the footage from the cockpit camera? Why isn't it mentioned there? And I think, again, this is just an initial report. We have 90 more days to go, and this report is sent shockwaves to airlines, pilots across the world, that now they need to be careful of this switch. The footage that comes out will actually show when these switches went back and why it went back. Remember, we're just talking about 25 seconds from wheels up to the crash occurring. And even if you try to restart it, which is the standard procedure in the Boeing Quick Response Handbook, there's no way you can start your engines and in less than 3 seconds. It takes at least 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, so we're in a situation where it's best that everybody stop commenting, stop refraining from speculating. We need to cooperate with that investigation. We need to leave no stone unturned now, because this is impacting every 787 aircraft operation in the world at the moment, and it is vital that whoever is in that investigation completes it in 90 days. Even if it take 180 days, I don't care. But let's establish, why did those switches go back, whether it's mechanical, whether it's maintenance, whether it was a flawed product, it was a flawed part number, whatever it is. Because there's no way, it's impossible that the pilot will go back, especially during flight phase. Now remember, when you take off, you're looking at your flight instruments. Your hand flying the aircraft. You've not put your autopilot on. You're focusing forward. You're trying to climb out. You'll never go put your hand way back and turn the switch off. That's impossible. So all this garbage about suicide, which has been circulating, is ridiculous. Let's respect the dead. Let's wait for the investigation to come out. We have 90 days, and after 90 days, according to ICAO, you can extend the investigation as long as you want, as long as we establish the real cause.
Correct. We get that point completely. But Mr. Agarwal, coming to you then, if we go to the contours of the particular report, one pilot was asking the other, why did you cut off the fuel? And although the other said, I did not, how do you infer this cockpit conversation? And could a system malfunction or technical fault shift both the switches so rapidly, or is it more likely a human error? How do you infer the cockpit conversation between the two pilots?
Firstly, thank you for having me. I agree with Mark. There is no way the switches. Remember one thing, the report says the switches transitioned. Now that is the position recorded by the digital flight data recorder. In this case, they refer to it as EAFR. I think electronic airborne flight recorder is the terminology they use. Okay, 3 seconds after takeoff, the engines start, the switches have transitioned to fuel cutoff. The pilots have taken, the RAT deploys, I think, 2 seconds after that. That RAT, and then in the Boeing Quick Reference Handbook, actually, it's not even a quick reference handbook, it is what is called a memory item. That means there are certain things the pilots have to keep in mind all the time. They're trained to remember these and they have to perform it from memory. And in the case of a dual engine failure, it requires a fuel switch to be put into the cutoff position and then put back into the run position so that the engines can be restarted. Because the 787 has an electronic engine control, the engines typically can get restarted in about between 30 seconds to 1 minute. But even in this case, it was too less. The APU switched on. Everybody is focusing on the switch. Uh, there is a service bulletin from GE, the engine manufacturer, requiring the change of a IC. I think it's the MN4 IC on specifically the engine fuel control unit of the engine electronic engine control. And it reports that because of this chip, there has been what is called an LOTC, loss of thrust control incident in the past. This service bulletin is not referenced in the AAIB report. It was issued in 2020 and then reissued in 2021. I'm very sure the investigators will look at that service bulletin and see did Air India take action on their engines, because GE clearly states in that service bulletin that if airlines choose not to do it, then GE will keep that in mind for any future performance considerations. Basically, in short, in sweet, saying if you don't do it, we are not responsible. So that is one issue there in the report that has not come out. Number three, at the very fag end of the report, please see, it says the recorder stopped functioning at 1:39 and 11 seconds. The crash fire tender has left the airport premises 5.5 minutes later. By safety regulations, the airport fire tender should actually reach anywhere within the airport boundary within 2 minutes. They have left the airport premises only after 5.5 minutes. It is in this case immaterial, because given the level of the fireball, it wouldn't have really mattered, but it also goes to show what is the safety preparedness at Ahmedabad airport. If they're taking 5.5 minutes for the crash fire tender, the ARFF vehicles to leave the airport. These are some of the issues. Partly I agree with Mark, that these fuel switches. There have been a series. These switches are made by Honeywell, and it has affected virtually every aircraft that Boeing has made, all the way from the 717, the 737, the 747, the 767, the 757, the 777, and the 787. So these are going to definitely be things that the investigators focus on. I would inform your viewers one simple thing. The preliminary report's job is to tell us what happened. It is the final report that is going to determine why it happened. That is the crucial difference. We all know this. We said a fuel switch transition to cutoff, but nobody knows why. And that is going to be the next stage of the investigation. And that's where I request people, please, I agree with Mark, don't speculate, don't throw wild theories around sabotage, suicide, this, that. Let the investigators do their job, and we will get the answers. Because this is the first time a 787 has crashed. There are almost 1,200 aircraft flying around the world. You can be rest assured, every airline, every country is looking at this accident and the results of this accident very, very closely.
Mr. Agarwal, we get that point completely, but if you had to highlight three questions which remain unanswered after the preliminary report, which will those be? I understand we are expecting the final report 3 months later, but for now, if you can highlight three most important unanswered questions.
One, about that MN4 IC, was it replaced by Air India on the GE engines as per the service bulletin? Number two, why have they not given us a full transcription of the cockpit voice recorder? Because they have downloaded the cockpit voice recorder. They only mention one part like this, and then they say the pilots issued a mayday. What were the other aspects, or what happened between the uh, from the time of the takeoff, or at least from the time the aircraft lined up on the runway to the point it crashed. We should have got the CVR transcript. Number three, I'll be honest with you, the AAIB should also expand on how very experienced agencies like the US NTSB, the UK AAIB are assisting them, and what is their technical expertise they are bringing to the table.
So, Mr. Agarwal, thank you so much for taking your time out and joining us here on ET Now and helping us decode what the preliminary report of the Ahmedabad accident, which happened on the 12th of June, means and what are the key questions that we need to keep an eye out on. Thanks so much for taking your time out.
Thank you for having me, Ji.
And joining us here on ET Now.